Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. And today I'm really excited to bring to the table Ryan Meinberg, and he's a current client. And we want to talk about how to break through fear to really get a career that aligns with you. And I know right now, I mean, we speak to hundreds of executives every week, and there's a lot of overwhelm in the market. People are saying it's like 2008 but worse. So it's so easy to fall into the trap of just taking whatever you can get because there's this perceived scarcity out there. And so I thought it would be really valuable to share an inspiring story of really overcoming that thought process and thinking and breaking through to really design a career and life that serves you. So, Ryan, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it.
Yeah, so tell me, obviously we met 30 days ago, right? It's insane to think it's only been a month, but where were
Right.
you? Where was your head at? Tell us about your story a little bit, what brought you to, this career evolved journey.
Yeah, definitely. So, me and my company or previous company parted ways a week before Christmas, actually. So it made the holidays a little bit more challenging in 2024 than previous years, but that's okay. And basically, when we parted ways, it was definitely unexpected. It's not something that I imagined would have taken place. And going into 2025, I did not expect to be revamping my career, revamping my life, and looking at it from a new lens. So, where I was thinking is the fact that for probably the past 2 years or so, I was aware that I was in need of a change, but I was so comfortable with where I was at and the lifestyle that it provided to my family, my wife, and so forth that I was never going to necessarily part ways unless God made it unbelievably clear. And He definitely did that last year. And as I was beginning to revamp and see what this looks like, I came across the Career Evolved brand through social media. And when I saw it, it definitely piqued my interest because it tugged on my heartstrings of being able to understand that looking for a new job and evolving your career are two very different things. And I felt very comfortable that with my previous work experience, education, things along those lines, I could find a new job, but I had spent so much time in one state for the past 8 years that I knew I needed more than just trying to find another job. I needed a complete evolvement of changing what the future is going to look like. And that's where Career Evolved caught my eye. And that's where I decided to dive deeper and learn more.
Yeah, and don't worry, we won't hold it against you because you're a wildcat from an MBA, a school of you just to give the viewers a background, I went to ASU, Arizona State. He went to U of
You were there.
A
I
for
did.
his
I did.
MBA, and we have a rivalry game this weekend, but I'm going to give you a hard time after that. But so tell
We'll
me,
see.
like, okay, you got creative with this. You got innovative. Like, how do you go from oh my gosh, is there enough jobs to I'm going to just redesign everything? Like there's a mindset shift because most people don't think about it when they're in that situation where you need to provide for your family, right? There's a practical side of it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing that I am most passionate about for everything that I do in life is the fact that I'm a very big proponent of a circle of trust, both personally and professionally. I'm a big proponent of accountability, whether it's in my marriage, relationships, church, work, wherever it may be. Accountability is the centerfold of how you can stay level-headed and get a clear perspective. And you use that accountability when you feel your emotions are overtaking your focus. So, what I did is the fact that I relied heavily on those resources, specifically my wife, Brianna, and my parents, and mainly my dad, because my dad has so much more experience in the business world. And we kind of got together, and I made my next career journey about everything in my life and how that was going to impact more than just me. While my wife and I try to grow our family with kids, career plays an impact on that. How I want to support my church and my community, career plays an impact on those things. And I realized that evolving it was more than just me, that decision was going to impact those closest around me. And so I kind of thought about my career evolved as it's not just my decision to make, while it's a group effort with me spearheading that piece. And I would be foolish to not listen to those who know me best and also care about me at a level that is going to influence my thought process. So I got with I got with those individuals and we just started putting everything on the table, no blinders whatsoever. And do not put anything off the table from the standpoint of the fact that even if it sounds unorthodox, weird, um, just strange or out of left field, put it on the table because brainstorming is all about how you can take pieces together and make a plan out of nothing. That's why it's the most important phase in any process improvement or any strategy that you align with. You have to brainstorm. So when we were talking, that's when we kind of decided, you know, let's take the next chapter of our life and innovate it right now to what that looks like. And the question was asked, what do you want? And when I couldn't answer that, I knew I had a problem. That's when I was like, I have an issue because I was asked point blank, what do you want? I couldn't name an industry. I couldn't name a company. I couldn't name a title. I couldn't really even name a dollar amount because I didn't know. I did not know what I wanted. And I knew that's where I had to start first.
I'm so
What,
glad you
what, what do you
started
want?
there because people forget the power of choice, that God-given power of choice, right? We
Mhm.
forget we have a choice. And that's like the most glorious moment where you're like, hold on, let me slow down. Let me get intentional here. Let me get clarity, right? Let me get really specific on what's going to align to my values. And I mean, this is a conversation most people don't have because they feel this kind of alignment is a luxury, especially in the tough times that we're seeing out there. So how did you get to a point where you're like, you went from when I met you, you're like, I've got to provide, I got to get a job in 30 days, let's go, boom, 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 to hold on, let's take a step back and look at the big picture here. How did you make that shift in your mentality?
Well, I would say I wasn't just the executive of trying to find an executive level role, but basically being the executive of my life and what that looks like. I received an abundant amount of support. And that was probably the first thing that helped get my confidence back, that helped me go from the fact that I'm not lost to sometimes life throws you curveballs. Sometimes the Lord puts you in different circumstances that you don't expect, and that's okay. So when I received an abundance of outreaches, calls, texts, emails, LinkedIn messages, it helped me regain my understanding and perspective by saying, this is not the end of the world. There are, first of all, there are things that are far more important than just a career. And your career is, it's definitely an important part of life, but you can't work for it to a point where you don't understand any other aspects of life. There has to be a balance, and that's always something I've struggled with. I've always struggled with balance. So when my friends and family came to me and we were talking about those pieces, it was about realigning the most important things, and career wasn't necessarily the most important thing in there. But as we created the alignment, career started to fall in place based on what I love to do. What am I good at? What are you excited about? And when I began to understand and ask myself the question, what is it that I do for free? Because whatever I do for free, I know I love it because I don't get any monetary gain or monetary value for it. And when I started having those conversations, then we started saying, where does that align for career opportunities? And
Yes.
then you dove deeper by saying, what flexibility does that provide? What are the caps on those elements? Do you love more than one industry? Why can you not do multiple industries? Just kept asking deeper level questions with never saying no. Because when you say no, that puts a parameter on it. And the only no that I was not willing to give up was I'm not going to stop supporting my church and our church community. I am not going to travel. I do not want to be away from home, and it would do an absolute tarnish on my relationships. And I'm not willing to be a quote unquote, pardon my language, but almost a slave to a company again from the standpoint of the fact that a company controls me. That will not happen again. Everything else is on the table. but those three things are non-negotiables. And those were my parameters. So then now I was able to start enjoying the process and see what is really out there that is maybe different than what I've been used to. And instead of getting out of my comfort zone, it was more about extending my comfort zone to be mentally prepared to the fact that God may provide some opportunities that I never thought were imaginable 30 days ago.
That is incredible. Such a shift, a huge shift of thinking, perspective, intention. It changes your whole trajectory. So, I guess one thing that I think stood out to me when we first met that I just knew once you decided what you want, it was inevitable. You have a strong sense of identity that isn't completely rooted in a job and a title. And I think that's a big piece because when you leave your job, it's like a week can feel like eternity when you're not working, right? Because you're like, Olivia, I can't stand still. I gotta be working, right? And so for you to slow down and get intentional, I mean, that's a big deal, right? So what you said was you basically redesign your career to work for you instead of you working for it. Tell me more about how you got to that space because it takes a lot of courage to take ownership of I am the boss and I'm creating these revenue streams through my skills. That takes courage. So how'd you get to that level of conviction so quickly?
Yeah, so that came through a lot of conversations with my dad specifically because my dad was an entrepreneur pretty much since about 2004. So there was a lot of experience there, and he kind of had a similar mindset from the standpoint of the fact that he was in a corporate world for a long time, and there were just aspects about it that just didn't quite relate to the things that he enjoyed most. So he left, and he started multiple businesses of his own in multiple different industries. And he had at one point, I think, three different businesses, one in aerospace, land, and investment. And they kind of all worked for him simply because of the fact that he created it and structured it that way that he had control over each different industry and what he wanted to do with it. And those were part of my roots in my childhood because at the time I didn't understand it because
Mhm.
I was still just a kid growing up. But now that I got older and I became in a similar situation, he kind of put some ideas out there that worked for him and his past experiences that could potentially also work for me as well because we're very similar in regards to ambition, goals, of course, faith, because I was raised in the faith, and very similar in skills in regards to business and business leadership. So that's when we were starting to discuss by saying, entrepreneurship is something that's very unique and being a very big part of capitalism and wanting to continue to grow or support a nation's economy is the fact that entrepreneurship is the way to go. You got to love doing it, but I'm not really crazy about starting my own business because it's not something that I'm specifically passionate about. But then he kind of shared me by saying, well, what if you didn't start your own business, but you created your own individual empire type where you latch on to other business and make them thrive at your own schedule, which is technically a form of entrepreneurship, but you don't have to start from the ground floor up if you don't want to. And then that's where I was thinking, okay, what does that look like? Consulting roles, business coaching and leadership development. I'm spending time by being able to understand how I can pick apart a P&L, provide strategy, eliminate waste, propel a business forward, things along those lines. All the things that I love to do, there's no real financial cap on those things because it's always evolving. And you can make a wonderful life for your family when you take out the cap of what it is your limits are. I never really expected that because I never thought of an entrepreneurial type angle without being an entrepreneur. But that's where I refer back to the circle of trust, where I could never stress enough that you are who you hang out with. And if you are blessed to have people in your life that you trust more than anything else who influence you and influence your thought process for the best version of yourself and in your faith, those people are gold. Listen to them and help let that be a big part of your career evolved journey.
I love this. This is so exciting because you intuitively and naturally landed on this fractional executive model that really has way more upside. But here's what keeps people from doing it. And I want to talk about this. People define security and safety in an organization. They put that job security in a job with benefits. And you have flipped the script and you're like, no, I trust myself to take this be up above and beyond. And I actually want that control and that empowerment. But was there any part of you that was like, what if I can't get clients? Oh my gosh, is this stable? Am I going to be secure? Like those are the fears that keep people from really designing their career to support that limitless potential.
Yeah, absolutely. For that, I would say that strategy is important. Never go into anything blind. Before you create that plan, there's steps that go in that exist prior to that. You don't just wake up one day and say, this is exactly what I'm going to do. You take risks, but they're calculated risks. They're methodical. You analyze every factor that goes into play, and then you evaluate your resources. You evaluate what you can afford. You put a plan together before you launch your plan to know every element that goes into it and how you're going to be able to respond and act accordingly. So from that standpoint, I would say is the fact that being an executive or having an executive mindset is a lifestyle that you want to make sure you live and breathe every second of every day. You, as a financial provider, you are the executive of your family's household finances, the same way you're an executive of a business, the same way you're an executive of every element of your life that you feel that you need to have a strong control over. With that, I would say is the fact that being a good steward is a big portion of executive level leadership. The way you take care of a business should be exactly aligned with how you take care of your personal finances. And as those things come kind of aligned together and so forth, the fear will always be sometimes a natural reaction to uncertainty. But what I have learned, especially being heavily involved in the church and so forth, and seeing what God has done, is the fact that there really is no such thing as certainty. Any business can go down under at any time. We've seen so many recessions. We've seen so many silly things that have taken place over the course of America's economy and the world's economy and so forth. The fact that the uncontrollables are truly uncontrollables. There are people who have lost their jobs for things that are foreseen, things that have been unforeseen. But as long as the roots are there, that are your fundamentals, your faith for me specifically, your faith in Christ, your circle of trust, and knowing the fact that nothing is unfixable, it can kind of shift your mindset to a place of confidence by saying, if this doesn't work, something else will. But you can't have an executive mindset be temporary. It's got to be part of who you are, because that will give you the confidence to know the fact that if something goes wrong, we can figure it out. If something doesn't come to fruition, we can figure it out. It's something my dad has always said, that there's no such thing as a problem without a solution.
And I think this is a level of, and honestly, it's such a mindset of extreme ownership, which is rare, right? I'm responsible for everything that happens or fails to happen in my life. And I trust myself to lead myself. And I think there's this deep conviction and self-trust and discipline that's built that gives you this rooted mindset of, well, of course I'm going to get clients, right? It's actually easier to get a client than it is a full-time job right now. So as you saw in 30 days, right? So is that what you were seeing as well out there right now?
Yeah, the executive market or the high level leadership rules is definitely a challenge right now. Businesses are definitely pursuing smart growth, which means the fact that they're really trying to stretch the dollar with less being more. And that's actually consistent across multiple industries, not just the automotive one, but definitely broader. So from that standpoint, it's the fact that when there's no certainty, sometimes it's important to just imply the leadership principles, for me, the biblical leadership principles that are part of your feast and famine. A lot of times when I talk to individuals and maybe you lose your job. So now you're concerned about what's going to happen to your family and so forth. The question you kind of evaluate is the fact that, well, you're in a famine season, but how were you a steward where you were in the feast season? Were you responsible? Were you a good steward? Did you take care of not only just your family and resources, but you were prepared for the unpredictable? Because the executive mindset is a true lifestyle change, there's so much to be evaluated on how a leader handles a business when things are going well, just as much as when you see a leader when things are not going well. And so from that standpoint, it's like it's definitely a risk when you're not pursuing necessarily these 50, 60-year-old businesses with 40, $50 billion in EBITDA every single year, and you're kind of trying to reinvent your own path. There's
Mhm.
a risk on both sides. But thankfully, it's that you can always afford risk, regardless of where you go, the billion-dollar empire or starting something new. You can always afford a risk if you were a good steward during your feast. And that would be the coaching slash mindset that I always give to different executives is the fact that God can give and God can take away. Always be mindful of the fact that before you're an executive in a business, you're an executive of your personal resources first.
I love that. It's so true. And it's like taking that personal accountability across the board. And I think sometimes people don't treat it that way, right? They don't look at themselves as the authority and executive and CEO of their life, right? And so I want to leave you with the last question, right? So if you're talking to people out there that were where you were like a little over a month ago, you know, they're having to enter this job market. They're overwhelmed. They're seeing all the news. They're seeing all the job boards and they're just really in fear. Like, what would you say to them right now? What's the best advice you could leave them with?
I'd probably lead them with a three-step guideline. One, do not lose faith. Nothing is the end of the world unless someone takes your salvation. So trust the Lord with it, trust Jesus with it, because it will and it always does work out. Even when it's frustrating, it does work out. So number one, do not lose faith. Two, do not disvalue or devalue those who care about you. They don't have to be an executive or a 50-year business associate who knows the economy better than anybody to create value in what your next career is going to be. Sometimes the best advice comes from the ones who just love you wholeheartedly and they throw something out there that makes you see it just a little bit differently. And you can use your own experience to run with it, but don't devalue those who truly love you that you trust because they see and want what's best for you and will point out traits and attributes in you that you may not see when you're frustrated. So definitely trust those who care about you the most. And then three, and in my opinion, it's super important, is the fact that entrepreneurial grit is something that's talked about a lot, specifically within entrepreneurship. But in today's world, it's just grit now. Sometimes when you're in a situation like this, all the education in the world can't really help you. When you're in a situation like this, all the experience doesn't really help you. But sometimes it's just the grit. It's just the grit of having a standard on yourself to keep going, knowing that when you feel frustrated, concerned, scared, and so forth, you rely back on those who love you the most, who's a phone call away to always give you that advice that you need. And then you utilize that grit to get back to work even when you don't feel like doing it. There's that's a quality that as I've hired and so forth in the past that it's something you can't teach. And it's so good to be able to have because everything is teachable, but the characteristics of what makes that person the person. So I would say never lose faith. Christ is still in control. Trust your family and those you love because they always want what's best for you. They don't need to be a business expert to provide valuable information on your career. And don't underestimate grinding.
I love it.
The grit's got power.
It's such, those are some powerful takeaways. And, thank you for sharing your story. It's so inspiring. I know it's just the beginning, so I'm excited to continue to see you take this to whole new heights. And I also want to invite anyone listening, if this talk inspired you, and you're interested in maybe creating a career that is not just another job or a company, and you're sick of kind of just being undervalued, and you want to really design your life in an innovative way and start consulting, coaching, advising, I want to invite you to a special opportunity to book a free 1 hour call with me. And you can do that at www.careerevolved.com/business. And the reason this is a big conversation right now is because honestly, I think disruption creates opportunity for change. There's no good time to design your perfect life, just like it wasn't the perfect time for Ryan. And there's no good time to just settle for fear because, quite frankly, fear is the catalyst to massive action and breakthrough. And so I would just encourage you guys to challenge your thinking, look at this differently, see it as an opportunity like what Ryan has done here and book a call and let's see what's possible for you. And Ryan, thank you so much. This has been so exciting to see you grow, and I know it's just the beginning.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Olivia. It was great.
Absolutely.